Welcome, Mentioners, to another episode of the Mentionables podcast. In today's episode, Caleb Johnston is going to go solo, giving a response to a video posted by Scott, the Southern Atheist. Let's see what this video has to say and what Caleb has to say in response.
Okay, so today we're going to be doing a response to Scott, the Southern Atheist. So let's go ahead and see what he has to say.
Hi, this is Southern Atheist. Thank you for showing up. Let's go down the rabbit hole of Christianity real quick.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Rabbit hole, I like that. And notice the roosters in the background. That's how you know he's really Southern.
I'm here today in front of the second largest church in my area. And today we're going to talk about human sacrifice in the Bible. The people that go in this church today, most of them, I'm going to say just about all of them, have never heard this story because they don't read their Bible.
Okay, I want to pause for just a minute here. And it's really important to note that he's probably right about this. Seriously, most Christians have not read their Bible, at least not in the detail that they should have.
The story is about a guy named Jephthah. And it's in Judges 11. And what's crazy about the story is that Jephthah makes a deal with God. He's worried about his next battle. He's a great leader, a great battle guy. And he's worried about, he leads the Israelites against the different tribes in their area. But he's worried about this next one. So what does he do? He makes a vow to God. And he says, this is what I'm going to do, God. If you give me victory over this next group of people that we're going to conquer, the first thing that walks through my door, I am going to sacrifice.
Okay, let's pause for just a second. I said the first thing that walks through his door. One small correction. It's actually the first thing that comes out of his door. Does change the context just a little bit.
So, what do you think he does? So he goes to battle, and guess what? God gave him favor. And when he gave him favor, the first thing that came through his house to greet him was his daughter.
Okay, so Scott's on point here, for the most part, except the guy's coming home from war, and he had vowed the first thing to come out of his house, when he comes back, he would sacrifice to the Lord. So his daughter comes out. Of course, he's going to be pretty upset. But let's pause for just a minute before we let Scott get too far down the road with this straw man. Two important things to remember here. When Jephthah makes this promise to the Lord, there's no indication anywhere in the text that this is something God wanted, or condoned, or expected of him. So, this vow was made on his own without the Lord demanding it of him or anything along those lines. So that's a very important distinction here. And we see this throughout the book of Judges. We see many stories of people doing things that the Lord didn't tell them to do. And certainly some of the acts are things that we see no indication God supported in any way. A little later in the book of Judges, we did see the story about the man's wife who is raped and then cut up into pieces and sent out to the 12 tribes of Israel. Again, there's no indication here that this is what was intended by God.
So what does Jephthah do? Jephthah tells his daughter, he says, take your friend and go off for a little bit, for about a month or two, and come back, and I have to fulfill what I promised to God. And then guess what he did? He sacrificed his daughter to the Lord because of the deal he made with God. The problem I have with this.
Okay, before you get into your problem, Scott, and by the way, let me say this. I really like Scott. He seems like a great guy. He's got the Southern charm turned up to 11. Seems really nice. Presents stuff in a great way. That's very understandable, and sure it could impact a lot of people, at least from his perspective. Problem is, again, he's straw-manning this just a little bit. Now, in regards to sacrifice here, we have no idea exactly what this means. However, the indication from the text, particularly where it's focusing on his daughter being a virgin, there's a strong indication here that it's possible that this sacrifice was a commitment to God. So, priesthood, if you will, in that she was committed to staying a virgin at that point. So this celebration of her virginity is possibly a indication that this was something she was going to maintain. Now, why would this guy be so upset if that was what the sacrifice was going? Well, as far as we know, that's his only daughter. So the family line is done at that point. You know, there's a strong indication here that sacrifice may not be in terms of a physical, violent death sense either. So between that, the fact that God didn't even ask this of Jephthah, you know, there's a couple problems with Scott's dislike of this story here.
Is most of the battles that are fought, according to the Christians that you argue with, or is because of the human sacrifices that the tribes were doing at the time, because it was so vile and dirty and nasty and against God. But yet here's a story of one of the leaders, the guy leading in the battle, doing a human sacrifice. Now,
again, the text really doesn't lend itself to this being a sacrifice, and certainly not one that's condoned in terms of the death sense here. And even if it did, there's the question of, you know, what exactly was intended here. And, you know, certainly the child sacrifice is a decent explanation for why some of these other tribes were called to be destroyed. We see that indicated in the text, but it's not the only reason we see Israel driving out these other tribes.
If God is all-knowing, and if God is all-powerful and knows the future and knows what's going to happen, he's this great and mighty God that knows even your thoughts, how easy would it have been for God to let a little kitty cat run out, which I think would be vile to kill the kitty cat, but wouldn't it be better than killing your daughter?
Okay, again, now we're going to burn down the straw man that he's created.
Don't forget that this Christianity, this whole scheme is built upon a human sacrifice. Is that not what they tell you, that God is sacrificing his son? The blood sacrifice? God couldn't have thought of a different way to do this? So when Christians come to you and give you this stupid argument that the reason why in 1 Samuel that God sends his people out and murders and slaughters and kills babies and destroys and wipes out whole tribes,
which they didn't follow through with, by the way,
is because they were doing vile acts of human sacrifices. Give him this story about Jephthah, where he made a vow to God and he sacrificed his own daughter when God could have easily have given him something else to sacrifice. God could have done anything in this moment, but he didn't. This is the crazy stuff that goes on in the Bible that Christians try to argue against. But I find it odd that this is here. So,
well, not so odd when we look at the context and see that it's another story that's laid out without God explicitly coming out and saying he's asked for this, without condoning it in any sense. There's lots of stories in the Bible that are vile and evil, but they're not condoned by God. It's a very important distinction.
I figured it was fitting for me to do this one in this parking lot, in this church parking lot here, the second largest church in my area. The first largest church, if I was in their parking lot, has cameras and security, and probably would have got me locked up. I've been kicked out several times. So
I do wonder what that was for. That's pretty interesting.
feel free to look at this scripture today and tell me I'm lying.
Not lying, but building up a mighty weak straw man, Scott.
I mean, there's not human sacrifice in the Bible. I just gave you one, possibly, no, actually two.
Alright, let's pause and talk about Jesus for a minute. With Christianity and the substantiary atonement of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, that is a human sacrifice in one sense. However, this is a sacrifice that's been prophesied. It's the sacrifice, so that there are no other sacrifices. You know, with Abraham, when he takes his son Isaac up on the mountain, there is a substitution there. But when this comes up again, and God's got his own son on the altar for the sacrifice, for the covenant price, for all humanity to be paid, there's no stopping it. This is God sacrificing his own righteousness and taking on the sin of the world so that people can be saved. So if you want to count that as a human sacrifice, you can do it. But it's a willful giving. God, the God-man, giving his own life for all of humanity. That is quite a different kind of sacrifice than someone burning their children or murdering their children on an altar to a god. It's substantially different. To equate the two is really a non sequitur in this situation. So, between the non sequitur and the straw man, I'm not really feeling it, Scott.
Jephthah's daughter and Christ himself. So, all I ask you to do, guys, think.
Absolutely. Very important to think critically about everything you hear.
You'll get a lot further in life if you just use your brain.
Completely agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's it, folks. Okay.